Hello, and thanks for joining us this evening. My name is Floyd Poenitz, and I'm president of Seventh-day Adventist Kinship International. It's my privilege to welcome you to Kinship Worship, a program that's for us and by us and takes place on the first Friday night of every month. So glad that you tuned in with us today. And tonight we have a special program, a tribute to Carrol Grady. Many of you are familiar with Carrol Grady, either have met her in person at one of the Kinship Camp meetings or have read her book, My Son, Beloved Stranger, book that she published first in 1995 and then republished in 2005. That book was groundbreaking, and it changed the lives of many parents, the way they looked at their LGBTQIA plus family, their children. So a few months ago now, actually last year probably, I did an interview with Carrol on the Kinship Connects podcast, and we're going to play that for you this evening just so you can get a little bit of an idea of who Carrol was and what her passion is in reaching out to parents who have queer children, and just the advice that she gave is to just love them. So sit back with me and please enjoy the podcast, and I'll talk to you on the other side. Thank you. Today it is my great privilege to speak with Carrol Grady. Carrol, thank you so much for joining us today.
It's nice to be here.
Yeah, so we have, our history goes back a ways. We've known each other for a few years now. I've enjoyed working with you. I miss some of the conferences, and maybe we'll talk about those more in depth in a little bit, but just being together with you in a booth had been exciting for me. So let me back up. Tell us where you're living now, and just a little bit about, your situation now and things like that.
Okay, we live now, and we're retired for quite a few years. Live in Snohomish, Washington, which is Western Washington, where it's beautiful and green and very wet right now.
Uh-huh.
My husband is a pastor or minister, and we spent 15 years as missionaries in Singapore. And okay. I have 3 sons who are all, actually one of them is a great grandpa already.
Wow, that's great.
Well, it's kind of complicated.
Okay.
But anyway, that's a little bit about me. My husband is very busy with his senior organization called SAGE, and I'm very busy with trying to finish quilts for all my grandchildren.
Wow. Okay, so that's one of your hobbies, I think, right?
That's right.
Okay. How many quilts have you made in your lifetime? Do you have any idea?
I don't. Probably 60, 70, somewhere in there.
Wow. That's a lot of work. I remember as a little kid, my mom made quilts, and she had this big frame set up in the living room, and the women would come together and do all this hand quilting and stuff. And
I wish I had known your mother. She must. I just have a little smaller frame that's just for me. But
yeah. Those are good memories for me, sitting underneath that frame sometimes and listening to the women talk as they were sewing. So, yeah. Well, let me back up just a couple decades maybe. And where did you grow up? And were you Adventist growing up?
Well, that is a couple decades and more. I grew up I lived in Evansville, Indiana, till I was 6. And then my folks moved to Tacoma Park, Maryland, where my dad was the lab tech at the Washington SAN, as we called it back then.
Uh-huh.
I went to Sligo Elementary School and Tacoma Academy. And just after I graduated, we moved to California, and I went to La Sierra College, where I met Bob. And yes, I've always been an Adventist, 4th generation.
Fourth. Okay,
Yeah.
great, great.
And always been gone to Adventist schools and married a minister.
Wow, wow. That's like the dream, the Adventist dream, huh?
That's right. I have all the credentials.
Great. And yeah, so after you got married, I mean, before you got married, you were all over the United States, it sounds like. And after you got married, where did that take you?
Well, my husband was first called to Southeastern California Conference, and we were there for about 10 years. And then we went to Hawaii, where he became a departmental director. And we were there for about 4.5 years. Then we went to Singapore for 15 years. Then back to the General Conference, which was still in Tacoma Park, but while we were there, it moved to Silver Spring, Maryland. And from there, my husband spent a couple of years at Christian Record, which is the Adventist service for the blind and the deaf. Mm-hmm. And then we came out here to Washington, where we ended up, and we've lived here longer than any place either of us have ever lived before.
Wow, wow. But you love it out there, right?
I do.
Yeah.
I like what used to be the cool summers. They're getting warmer.
Yeah. Now you said that Bob is involved with SAGE, is that correct? And what does that stand for?
Well, when he first came out here, they had they get together for a potluck every quarter, I guess, for the seniors in the conference. And he saw a bigger vision, so he really extended it to all the seniors in the conference. I think at first it was just senior workers, but we extended to the whole conference. And they have, the last couple of years with COVID have been a little bit sad because we can't do much, but they have fellowship opportunities to go on different entertaining kind of things. They also go around painting and building on churches and schools here in the conference. And every year they go on a mission trip with Maranatha to someplace in the world.
Wow. To build a new church in different locations. Wow. That sounds fun. Now, is he still pastoring or?
No, he finally retired when he was, about 90, I guess.
In 1990?
Now he's 80. He's now 89.
Okay. Got it.
But he's still busy with SAGE.
Great. So go back, I don't know, 25, 30 years ago, did you ever think that you would be sitting here talking to me about this today?
No, it was 31 years ago. You're
31. Wow. Okay.
Yes, our youngest son was in college when I finally realized that he was gay. He had started at Pacific Union College when we first came home from Singapore. And he had, of course, had figured this out when he was in 7th grade and read his Bible textbook that described homosexuality and realized that described him. So, but he never told us, of course. But he did consult with his Bible teacher and the father of one of his friends. Well, he was determined not to be gay, so he met a girl that first summer while he was working at summer camp. And they became engaged during that first year. Well, Bob and I were concerned that he would, that it would be too long because they were going to wait until she graduated. She was a year ahead of him, and then they would get married. And that was like 3 years. And we knew how hard it was just to wait 1 year to get married.
Uh-huh.
So we had talked him into coming back and going to CUC for a year and staying with us while we were at GC. And his girlfriend came back for Christmas, and she came back the next summer, and they both worked at the GC. Then they went back to PUC, and it was during that year that he called and said that they had postponed the wedding, and later it turned out that they had canceled it. And we were totally shocked. We didn't know, but suddenly all the little things that I had wondered about through the years began to add up. And I really didn't know very much at all about homosexuality, but I began to wonder. So
Right.
I called the pastor at the church because I knew that he and his girlfriend had gone to him for counseling. And he told me, I asked him if I should talk to Paul. And he said, yes. And that was the moment when I knew for sure that my suspicions were correct.
Wow.
And it was a big shock to me, really big shock. My first two questions were, will he be lost? And will he get AIDS? Because that was right at the heights of the
Sure.
AIDS crisis.
Right.
So
They always say that mothers know. So in the back of your mind, even though homosexuality wasn't even on your radar, you still felt that something was amiss or different?
well, I felt like he was my soulmate, really, because we shared so many of the same interests, writing poems, writing stories. He liked crafts. He wanted to learn to quilt like I did.
Wow, good.
He was very artistic, and he was a very talented musician. And so those were all things that we shared. And I was kind of happy to have a son share those things, because you'd think those would be things more that a daughter might share.
Right.
But it still didn't really dawn on me until, it was just about that time that homosexuality began to be in the news. And articles coming out in the magazines and so forth. And so that kind of sensitized me to what this all might mean. And
yeah. So what precipitated him to actually tell you? I mean, was it like boiling under the surface and it just bubbled over, or did he ever tell you that?
He never told me. It was when after he told me that their engagement was off, that I began to wonder. And then I called the pastor, and he was the one that really let me know. So then I wrote a letter to Paul and told him that we loved him and that we wanted to talk, if he felt like talking to us about it, that we were looking forward to ways to help him. Of course, at that point, we were trying to help him get over it.
Help meant something else. Yeah.
That was when we were at the GC. So I went into the family ministries department and I said, I have a friend whose son just told her he's gay. I'm sure the Lord has forgiven me for that lie.
I'm sure.
And do you have anything I can give her to read? So she gave me all of this material they had on Colin Cook. Oh,
okay.
So when Paul came home for spring vacation that year, Bob was gone. He was traveling, but I told him all about this wonderful ministry that could help him change. And then he told me about the recent discovery that his ministry was not what it was cooked up to be.
Oh, so he already knew about that then.
Yes, he had already.
Was one step ahead of you. Okay. Wow.
So I just began trying to learn more about it because, like I say, I was completely ignorant at that point. But that was when articles began to come out in magazines, and I read everything I could find, looked it up on the internet, and I tried to educate myself. And as I learned things, I would share them with Bob, and he came along behind me a little bit, but he accepted that too, and became was the first when I first told him when he came home from his trip. He said, "Oh, I think it's just a phase he's going through." So I'm going to tell him that we'll pay for him to go to counseling. And so Paul found a counselor in PUC, but it turned out this was a understanding counselor who was trying to help him accept himself. And so after a while, he told us, he said, "I don't feel right in accepting your money for my counseling because it's not doing what you want to do."
Right.
But then, Bob began to realize, because Paul shared with us his struggles in the past, and he began to realize that this was something that he didn't choose, and began to learn. I think it was maybe a year or so after we had heard about Paul, found out about Paul, that they had the big don't ask, don't tell thing in the armed services.
Right. Okay.
And we listened to on TV to the hearings that they had when they asked all these people questions. That was a very educational thing too. But it was go ahead.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
I was going to say it was still several years before I could even bring myself to read any of the new theology. I thought, oh, these are just people that are trying to condone sin or something.
Right.
Or to change what the Bible says. Because I had learned about the clobber text by this time. So I was afraid really to read any of this stuff for fear I'd be influenced by something that wasn't right.
Right.
But finally, Ben Kamina talked me into reading some of these things. And to me, it made so much sense. So,
And you met him through Kinship, or how did you know Dr. Ben?
Well, I think it was through Ingrid.
Okay. Ingrid Anderson?
Yes.
Inga Anderson?
Inga Anderson,
yeah. Yeah. Okay.
She was a friend of his, and for a while I was working with her.
Okay.
And got acquainted with him through that.
Okay.
Before I even knew about kinship.
Got it. Good. Okay. Yeah. So did you ever go back to the GC or back to the church saying, "Hey, I need some more resources"? The ones you gave me kind of fell through the cracks and didn't know what turned out?
By this time we were out here in Washington by the time I wrote my book and had it published. And actually I should mention that we were spent a year, almost 2 years in Lincoln, Nebraska when Bob was vice president at Christian Record. And it was, now I forgot what I was going to say about that. Anyway, I took a class in creative writing at the university there just for fun. And one of our assignments was to write a story that changed our lives. Well, that was definitely the before and after incident in my life. So I wrote that story, and everybody said, "Oh, you've got to write a book." And that was what encouraged me to go ahead and write my book. So, but
and how was Paul doing during all this time? Was he?
Well, he was. Once we began talking, he was very happy that I was supportive for quite a while. He lived with a Catholic guy for 9 years after he graduated from college, and he became a Catholic. He was going to convert Jeff, but instead Jeff converted him.
Right. Okay. That happens.
A lot of how it came about was that Jeff invited him to sing in the choir at his Catholic church, and they were very accepting. I know that Catholics in general are not so accepting, but that particular church was. So that was what he knew, that Adventism was not accepting, because he had been very much harassed when he finally came out at PUC.
He came out while he was there.
Yeah, after he broke his engagement.
Okay.
So
Okay.
during his last year there, he came out and had some really terrifying experiences with some of the guys there. So he ended up moving out of the dorm and staying with a couple of lesbian friends.
Okay.
But it was, he was an English major, and he wanted to go back to Far Eastern Academy and be an English teacher. That was his dream. Well, he began to realize that probably would never happen once he admitted that he was gay. But that was what he graduated with, but he never did get his teaching credentials, because it was during that time his life was in such upheaval that he never really finished that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So where are we going from here? Let's see.
Well, you were taking a class, and you were going to write a book, and I don't know if I can. I don't think this will really focus very well on the book, but sorry, I have the blur on my screen. So you wrote a book called "My Son, Beloved Stranger: Can Kate Accept Her Gay Son? Can Her Church?" So who was Kate McLaughlin?
Well, my husband's brother was not at all happy about the Grady name being dragged through the mud.
Oh.
And I think I was, right after it was published, I was invited to speak at a church in the conference where he was a pastor. And so, although actually it was before that, I decided to use a pseudonym. So McLaughlin was my mother's name.
Okay.
So that was where that came from.
Okay.
But anyway, I had to use that pseudonym to keep him happy.
Mm-hmm.
And but when I did a second printing of my book, I used my real name.
Right. Yes. Okay. Well, did you have any challenges with the first book, or did the church just jump on that because you were like a pioneer mother writing about a topic that hadn't really been written about like this before? Did they just knock your door down trying to get your story?
Well, no. At first, I had quite a bit of support back at the GC because I knew so many people there. And I think it was the Women's Ministries Department promoted let's go back to the first Kinship Camp meeting that I went to just after my book was published.
Mm-hmm.
And they asked me to do something for parents. I think that was Dave that asked me that. And so I started a newsletter called Someone to Talk to.
Mm-hmm.
And then I sent it to different people at the GC. And the Women's Ministries Department promoted it. The Family Ministries Department promoted it. Seems like there was another group. Anyway, I went back to the Toronto GC. When was that? 2000?
I believe, yeah.
Yeah, so that would be about 5 years after my book was published. Shall we go into that?
Well,
the conferences?
Yeah, but let me just touch real quick on the book. You got it published by, was that Pacific Press that published it?
Yes.
Okay.
And Marvin Moore was my book editor, and he would not let me put in that Paul became a Catholic. I had to.
Was that worse than being a homosexual?
I think so, or at least as bad. So I sort of just described it as could have been Episcopalian or Methodist or Lutherans. I didn't really specify what the church was that he went to.
Right. Okay, so that was a stipulation of getting it published then.
Right.
Okay.
And of course, at that point, I hadn't really accepted the theology changes. So I was still kosher as far as the GC was concerned.
Okay. You were still hoping that Paul could change, right?
Yes, at that point I was.
With enough prayer, fasting, whatever, or?
I don't know. I did. By the time my book was published, I probably didn't think that, but I didn't put that in the book.
Right.
Because I was still feeling my way a little bit.
Sure. It's a journey. Life is a journey. We're all still on it, thank goodness. So, okay, let's jump to General Conference then, because that was a pretty exciting time for me, I know.
Yes.
How did you get invited, or how did you, the one in Toronto?
I applied for a booth. And
under the name of someone to talk to?
Yes, that was the organization that I was representing, which was my ministry for parents.
Right.
And at that point, it was something that the church did not address. And so, and they didn't think I was going too far in the wrong direction. So they allowed me to have it. Okay. And that same year, I had a booth at, what's the self-supporting group?
ASI?
That Maranatha is part of. They have a convention every year. I can't think
the ASI group?
ASI, that was it. I had a booth at their meeting that same summer. And unfortunately, they're much more conservative group. And so there were some people that complained about even having anything to do with homosexuality there. Okay. So I was told that I couldn't have a booth there anymore. But as far as the GC was concerned, I had one in Toronto, then Atlanta, I think. That was the one you went with me to. And St. Louis.
Right.
I think that was all, because I think the next one was where? Oh, no. Wow. I'm getting old, 85. I can't.
You're doing great. There was a teachers conference in Nashville that you were uninvited to at the last moment because everyone was afraid of Carrol Grady. Of what you might share and tell people, huh?
Yes, that was after the GC had told me I couldn't come. Was it the Atlanta GC where?
That's where we were with the Spectrum booth and and did the questionnaire and talked to people. Right.
That when they told me I couldn't come at the very last minute, and so you and Dave and was it Carol Toy? I think.
Right.
Had already bought tickets and had a place to stay and all. So we decided, and Spectrum had invited us to be at their booth because they were having the theme of the big tent Adventism that summer. But at the very last minute, when the GC found out that they were going to let us be part of it, they said, no, if you do that, we can't have a booth. So we decided to go back and do a hot potatoes questionnaire. Right there in the exhibit hall, and just question people as they came by. And we were standing near the Spectrum booth, but not
Right.
connected with them. So we asked questions on evolution, on homosexuality, on what were some of the other things? Do you remember?
Just women's ordination, bearing arms.
Yes, women's ordination was another one.
Yeah,
and,
yeah.
And we were I think we got over 1,000 people altogether. And we were interested that Africa, which at that time was most of the people there were apparently opposed to women's ordination. But the women that came through said, it's not us. We were. So, and I think that's come out quite a bit more since then.
Right.
And then after that, I asked for a booth at Teachers Convention, and they also let us know at the very last minute. So we went that I couldn't come. So we went back there and sort of had our materials in our arms and just interviewed people as they walked by. Mm-hmm. And Stephen
and Deneen were there with the film.
Yes, they were there with the film, and so Stephen had some T-shirts made up that had my picture and said, "Beware of Carrol."
Yes, I still have mine hanging in my closet.
I saw that one too.
It's a memento, yes. Yeah, so things really changed in those first years then. I mean, since Toronto, because I was there with you with Toronto, and
Yes.
so yeah, Kathy was there, Ella Hammonds was there,
Dave.
and yeah, and people were shocked to hear that someone was wanting to talk about homosexuals and that there really were Adventist homosexuals, even though I was standing right there by you. I was kind of straddling the fence there in my presentation of because I didn't want to be too offensive. I think we were almost across the aisle from Doug Batchelor's booth.
And I think also Andrews was across from us too.
Could be.
And that was not Ron Knott, but his brother. Maybe I shouldn't be mentioning names, but anyway, he was very opposed to that. He was from I guess it was the publishing entity at Andrews.
Right.
So
what do you think actually switched the light switch at that point, or changed minds? Because people didn't continue to be, or the church leadership didn't seem to continue in their progressive ideas or even willing to listen. They were like pushing us away more and more. What do you think caused that or happened?
Well, I know that Bill Johnson, when he was editor of the Review, he was quite supportive, and he published some articles. And then he told me that he had gotten irate phone calls in the middle of the night, just raking him over the coals for publishing such things. And Bill Knott was one of the associate editors then, and he didn't want to keep publishing. So he told me that he didn't feel that he could continue to publish any more articles. So that was the beginning of the lockout. But I still wrote letters and sent articles to a number of people there at the GC that I knew. And when Jan Paulson was president, he was supportive. Mm-hmm. But of course, and when the Dan Jackson, when he came into the North American division, he was more supportive. And then it was like, I was persona non grata at GC after that.
Uh-huh.
So I sort of joined the working from within the church to change it, but the underground movement.
I remember you for a different cause, standing up on the balcony somewhere at GC, unfurling a banner. Which GC was that? Was that
That was the same one where we were invited to be with Spectrum, and that was Donna. Oh dear, my can't remember names, but Donna Herrick had this great big banner made that said, "The greatest want of the world is the want of men who will stand for the right, who will stand for women's ordination." I can't remember all of it.
Right.
So we stood up in the balcony during a general session, she and another woman and I, and held it up. And after a while, one of the GC vice presidents came up and asked us to remove the banner and come out in the hall and talk to him. So we did. And Donna in particular, she took over the conversation immediately. And she said, how it was one of the Black vice presidents. She said, how your people have been abused, and brought it right around to gays being abused, or
right.
the group, the alphabet group.
Right.
And then she launched, and then the other girl said that she had taken theology in college and was so devastated when she couldn't use her knowledge. And then Donna, before he could say anything, launched right into a prayer for him and for us. And
wow.
So I don't know what kind of an influence that had on him, but I think it made him sympathize with us a little.
Sure. Yeah. So you had two missions or challenges there that caused kind of a black strike against you or something, or a black mark against both the women's movement as well as LGBTQ.
Well, yes, that was this year that Ted Wilson was elected president. So I was not at all in his favor. But, it's amazing because I was very much an introvert as I grew up.
Mm-hmm.
And even after I married Bob, I could play the piano with my back to the audience, but I didn't like to get up in front and do anything. And now I've become quite an activist.
You're center stage now. Yes. And I think that's wonderful. I like I say, I can remember many conferences with you, and you would stand out in front of the table or behind the table with the books and talk to people going by, and not afraid of sharing your feelings. So quite brave.
Yes, there were a number of other places where we had conferences, youth conferences. We went to several of those before they got our number.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And I think there was a youth conference in Houston or Dallas. Was it that we had?
Yeah, I can't remember which city, but we've had several youth conferences that we were at, and there were some of coming out ministries, which was not in existence at that time yet. They were the individual people were at those. So what are your feelings now after all these years about change ministry or conversion therapy?
Yes, I really studied into that a lot and read a lot of books about it. And I really feel that they damage people because a lot of leaders of those ministries later on said it was something they were aspiring to, but it really hadn't happened to them. They did not change. And then when our coming out ministry started, or even before that, when we just had one, I really felt that these were older men who had lived lives of promiscuity or even prostitution, and in their older age, when probably their libido was a little lower, then they wanted to come back to God. And when they left their former lifestyle, that included homosexuality. So I can understand why they feel like they have to leave it behind, perhaps. Although I don't really believe that they have changed. I think they are still part of that, but they don't want to have anything to do with it anymore. And so I'm happy for them if they can leave that very unwholesome lifestyle, but I don't think that they should try to tell all the people that are part of the LGBTQ community that they should live that way.
Right. So. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So have you been accused of drinking the LGBTQ Kool-Aid and being influenced by Kinship in your thinking? Have people told you that?
In a way, when we had that big conference just before our book was published with Spectrum,
right,
and the current Home and Family or Family Ministries director was there and was quite skeptical. And I think at that point he wrote me off. And so I suppose he thought I was influenced, but I think anyone, I would like to say one thing before we quit. As I look back now on my life since I found out about Paul, at the time I thought it was the worst thing that could happen to me. And I spent many nights crying all night. My Bible that I had then was crinkly pages from all the tears that fell on it.
Yeah.
And now I look back after all the education and all the wonderful gay people that I've known as one of the best things that ever happened to me, because it opened up my mind. You know, I grew up in an Adventist home, went to Adventist schools, married an Adventist minister, and I never had thought outside of that box. And it's just like a whole new world that is out there that I can understand from a broader standpoint than what I grew up with. And I'm really thankful for that.
Good. Well, let me ask you a difficult question. And because a lot of people, after reading your second book that came out under your name, and that book is available on the Kinship website, if anybody, I encourage everyone to read it. It's a good typical story of an Adventist mom, Adventist family finding out about their son and the journey that it goes through. But a lot of people then ask me, well, what happened to Paul after the last chapter? And I don't know if you want to tell a little bit, and then I have a follow-up question about that, if you want to just share a little bit. And I don't want to do anything personal, give away anything that's uncomfortable, but
well, after he came out at PUC, he went down, after he graduated, he went down to live with his brother in Santa Rosa, and he met a Catholic guy that he lived with for 9 years. And he became a Catholic, and they finally decided that they weren't comfortable being sexually active as Catholics. So he went back to, after 9 years, he decided to go to a Catholic ministry back on the East Coast, and because they were looking for someone with computer skills. And he was there for about a year, and while he was there, he met a Catholic priest who was just building a monastery with the help of two novices that were helping him. And Paul was had a very romantic view of Catholicism and decided he would like to join their monastery.
Mm-hmm.
And the Catholic priest said, I can help you overcome your homosexuality. Well, it turned out that his way of overcoming it was to force Paul to submit his will in everything to the priest. And that became a very intolerable situation. So about 8 months later, Paul wrote and said, can I come home?
Yeah.
And being as that was a Carmelite monastery, which is I can't think of the right word, but they're, oh dear. Well, anyway, they don't have anything to do with the outside world. And we would never see him again once he took his final orders.
Wow.
Which was a terrible thing.
Yeah, yeah, sure.
We were thrilled when he decided to come home. And he's lived here in Washington area ever since. But he went to a reparative therapist and for about a year, who convinced him that it was our fault that he was gay. So we had about a year there where we didn't have much communication. And then things warmed up again, and we're very close now. But during this time, he decided that, well, after working with the therapist, he came home and joined a Catholic group that supported celibacy. And he finally decided that he had learned to sublimate those feelings and was going to get married to a woman. Well, he joined a Catholic dating site and went on several different dates, and he'd tell us after the date was over, well, there just wasn't any spark there. Which I could have told him, but he did finally meet a girl that was very much a soulmate of his, who shared a lot of his interests. And he told her that he was gay, but that he would put that behind him. And so they got married, and they have 3 adorable little boys.
Oh, beautiful, beautiful.
They're growing up. The oldest one is 12 now, but they're sweet. And I love them dearly because they're the only ones of our grandchildren that lived close enough when they were younger for us to be with all the time. Now they live in Idaho.
Okay.
But, we, before they got married, we told them, we're there for you, whatever happens. Mm-hmm. We love you. And, you know, I don't feel like you have to be an Adventist to be saved anymore.
You've journeyed come along on that journey, yes. Yeah.
Yes. I know he's a very devout Catholic now, and I support him in wherever his life leads him. Good.
And he's happy. He's happy now.
He's happy.
Yeah, yeah.
Let me just tell you, they have 1 dog, 3 cats, 2 rats, a hamster. I don't know how many rabbits, because recently one had 13 babies and 20 some chickens. So he doesn't have time to not be happy.
No, and those lucky kids, they get to play with all those. That's wonderful. That's wonderful. So my difficult question then is, the church would look at Paul's story and say, well, see there, that's exactly what we're wanting, except for the Catholic part. That's exactly what we want all LGBT people to do. What do you say to that? Is Paul really a success story? Or is he just happy being himself, and this is where his journey has led him?
Well, what I think I would say is that I probably know, I would guess, 1,000 or more gay and lesbian people now. Mm-hmm. And I mean, the whole alphabet. And I've known of lots of them who have married the opposite sex.
Mhm.
And I only know of one couple that has stayed together to their old age. And most of them have, that marriage hasn't lasted beyond their children being teens.
Mhm. Mhm.
So that's why I say we're there for Paul, whatever happens. I hope for his sake and the boy's sake and everybody's sake that he can stay with it. I know he's very strong-willed and
Mhm.
wants his marriage to succeed. But I don't think that means he's not still gay.
Right. That's not something that you guys talk about or even mention much anymore. So yeah. So
used to be able to talk about everything, but now we don't talk about that or religion.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Controversy.
Or COVID.
Okay. That's also a point of contention, I'm sure. Well, good. I appreciate you sharing today with me. I know our listeners have enjoyed it. And do you have any final thoughts for parents? Because I mean, you kind of started the parents ministry for Kinship or within Kinship, and so if there's a mom or a dad who's struggling to learn to accept, but the Bible says kind of mentality, what do you want to tell them?
Well, I want to tell them that God loves their children more than they do, more than any parents can love their children. And that the best thing they can do is just to love them and accept them as they are, whether they understand it or not. And if they really try, they can become educated about not only the science, but also about the theology. But if they don't want to go into it that deeply, just love them. I think it was Virginia.
Jason?
Yes, the daughter of HMS Richards, who has 2 gay children. Well, she's gone now, but she had 2 gay children. And she said to another mother, just love them and keep them. That's all you can do.
Wow, that's powerful, very powerful. Yeah, if we could just keep sharing that message. And again, thank you, Carrol. You've been such an inspiration to so many people. You're a treasure in Kinship. We love you. And I'm happy that you're still active with us.
And I love you too.
Thank you. So thanks for listening to the podcast, and hopefully that gave you a little bit better understanding of Carrol and her passion. She became a friend to many of us and was like a mother to all of her Kinship family. She stood up for us, and I know I did lots of conferences with her where we shared a booth, and she had the ministry, someone to talk to. And yeah, it was quite special just seeing Carrol in action, soft-spoken, quiet, somewhat introverted lady mother who would definitely take an arrow for us and stand up for our rights and to tell people that Jesus loved us unconditionally. It was quite amazing, and we're going to miss Carrol a lot, and but she will live on in our hearts. If you haven't read her book, or you haven't read her book recently, I invite you to go to the Kinship website under Stories, and there is the book in digital format there, and you can read it. Share it with your parents, share it with your loved ones, and just tell them about Carrol. And if you knew Carrol, share what she meant to you, and what that relationship was like. We will miss her, but her life, her legacy will never die, will never go out. We will always remember Carrol. There'll be a memorial service for Carrol at her local Adventist church, Bellevue, Washington, Seventh-day Adventist Church, on May 6th at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And if you're anywhere in driving distance, I invite you to go to the service. And I think there will be a time where people can share their memories of Carrol. And so if you'd like to take part in that, be sure and do so. We also did a Zoom, thanks to John Edwards, before she passed, and there were several of us that got online on the Zoom and shared our memories. And some of those on the Kinship board, I believe our communications department is going to share as a tribute to Carrol. So be sure and watch for that in the near future on the social media and on the Facebook pages. And shifting gears, I have some good news that I would like to give you a little sneak preview of, and just let you know that we have been approved for this year's Kinship Camp Meeting, and more details are coming very, very soon. But I did want to let you know that it's going to be Veterans Day weekend in Southern California, so the weather should be great. And for any of you who have off for Veterans Day, you won't have to take as many holidays. So yeah, stay tuned. Again, Southern California, in the beginning of November. I believe it's like November 9th through 12th or something like that, but it's that Veterans Day weekend. So put it on your calendar, plan on joining us. We're looking for a large crowd. It's going to be a wonderful venue. And the Kinship Camp Meeting coordinator, Gabriel, is going to have a lot of wonderful programming in store for us, for all ages, for the queer community, for parents, for allies, for everyone. So we hope to make this the biggest and the best camp meeting yet. So look forward to more announcements. If you haven't signed up to be a member of SDA Kinship or to be on the subscriber list, please do so. Go to our website, click on Become a Member, and just fill out the information there, and we'll get you connected with other queer Adventists, former and current Adventists, connected with parents, connected with allies, connected with supportive pastors. And just let us know what your needs are, and we will try to meet those as much as possible. Kinship is all about building a safe community, something that you can't always find in your local Adventist church. So please sign up for the newsletters. We have some wonderful Zooms. Catherine Taylor, our vice president, has some great things in store for us coming up this month and for the rest of the year. So join in those, and let's build community together and have a voice that we need to have in the Adventist church. I wish you a happy Sabbath. Thanks for joining us today. And remember that God loves you unconditionally, just as you are. And Kinship is here for you. Take care. Bye-bye.